Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about Schulte in London. I don't know if the reflection here actually shows through. Yes, the long-awaited Schulte London recording box. Obviously, the general tenor of this Schulte project is to do something similar to what Deutsche Grammophon did with Abbado. That is, do him by place. You know, it's Schulte in Chicago and Schulte in London. I assume at some point we'll see Schulte in Vienna. He's kind of like, you know, Iphigenia in Brooklyn, Iphigenia in Torried, Iphigenia in Aulis, Iphigenia in Cannes, Iphigenia, Schulte and these conductors, they're peripatetic, and they made recordings wherever they happened to land. Although, I have to say, Schulte was no Iphigenia. That's for damn sure. Anyway, this box is one of these boxes of doom. Actually, it's rather funny how they dealt with this. You know, you pick it up and it slides out and the CDs fall out and it lands on your foot and hurts like hell. Actually, what they did was this. They finally figured out to cut a little notch out of the bottom here, so maybe you can get your fingers around it as you do this. Of course, this tells you that it's a box of doom, but dear Decca, wouldn't it have been easier just to not make it a box of doom and put a lid on the top, you know, like Deutsche Grammophon does, for example? Or does Decca still think it has to have its own personal inconvenient way of making their own proprietary cube? I don't know. I really don't know. Now, Schulte was an interesting artist. He really was. He was a conductor of great nervous tension. His tempi tended to be swift, although he could be very, very slow in slow movements. He was sort of the opposite of Klemperer, you know, who was slow and fast movements and fast and slow movements. Well, Schulte was basically fast unless he wasn't. And although, this is the weird thing, he had kind of a reputation for being somewhat crude and insensitive, a brute, a bully, something like that. But he wasn't really, because he actually had a certain tendency to hold back the full force of the orchestra at climaxes and things, which I found very off-putting, actually. You know, where he did not have any problem letting the full force of the orchestra sound forth was like in passages that weren't so loud, hence his reputation for being somewhat rough-edged. Although he was a wonderful man of the theater and a terrific opera conductor. He was just exciting and dramatic. And if he wasn't the ultimate in probingness or whatever, probitude, probity, probaciousness, you know, who cares? He had good singers. He had a good label behind him. And boy, were they behind him. You know, rumor has it that when he passed away, he was considering doing all the Sibelius and Nielsen symphonies, but he never got to them, to which all of us Sibelius and Nielsen fans just went, whew, dodged a bullet there, didn't we? God only knows how that would have turned out. But in any case, his London recordings, of which there are, let me see, what have we gotten here? Lots of discs. Does it tell us how many discs are in here? No, I shouldn't, after all. I mean, that would be far too much to ask. No, 36 CDs. Limited edition, mind you. His London recordings contain really a lot of his best work. On the whole, in terms of percentages and hits and misses, it's probably a better box than his Chicago box. Although the Chicago stuff has a lot more stuff, so there's a lot more to miss. And he does. But that's a whole nother issue, because the Chicago box, I think, is probably out of print by now. Who knows what they're going to do with this? I have no clue. And how many different ways they're going to package and repackage and re-repackage all of this material, because there is a lot of it. Let us simply go through the box and see what's in it, and then we can determine for ourselves whether or not you should own it. Let's see here. I actually was looking forward to this, because I really do. You know, these are the recordings that sort of put him on the map. Those in the early Vienna recordings, which really, frankly, If it were up to me, I would have stuck all of the early stuff in one box and had an end to it. Why prolong the agony? It doesn't make any sense to me. What's this? Oh, look, it's. Oh my goodness, it's Schulte with Elizabeth Montgomery. Just kidding. I think that's Lady Schulte, or the late Lady Schulte, or whoever she was. Oh my! And here he is with Christa Ludwig. I think it's Christa Ludwig. Yes, Christa Ludwig. That's it. Who told me a very juicy story about how he made a pass at her at one point, and she told him to go stick it where the baton don't shine. Good for her. Anyway, let's continue with the actual contents. Oh, so here we have the list of works, and then we have the CD track listing. That's what we want. All right, so it begins with Mozart. That's the Prague Symphony, Symphony number 25. That's on CD 1. It's not a terribly long CD. Schulte was never much of a Mozartian, apart from the operas, which he did extremely well. But as an orchestral conductor, Schulte and the classical period did not go too well together, and this Mozart is pretty average, I would just say. Forgettable. Then we have Piano Concertos 25 and 27 with Alithea de la Rocha and the London Philharmonic. And those are good because you have Alithea de la Rocha. So we don't really care who the conductor is, do we? And there's more, this time with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, number Concerti 24 and 26. And then we get Concerti 10, 7, and 20. Oh, wow, yes. These are the performances with the English Chamber Orchestra, with Schulte, Barenboim, and Schiff, and the English Chamber Orchestra in the E-flat concerto, the triple concerto, and other things. Let's see, who's doing the rest of it? Schulte, piano, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's Daniel Barenboim. No. And it's let's see. And Andras Schiff in number 20, I think. No, 4 through 8, 3 through 8, 1 through 8. Oh, and the double. Oh, there you get the double. And yeah, you get the triple and the double. That's what you get. I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's the triple and the double, and that's fine. The bottom line is, why go through all of that aggravation just to say it's perfectly fine? It's perfectly fine, but no one's going to get this set for that. Now we get the Haydn London Symphonies, which you do with the London Phil. Most of these are with the LSO or the London Phil. The Haydn London Symphonies are not bad. I was actually surprised when I first heard them about how not bad they were. But they are certainly not the best. Schulte's approach to Haydn was a little old-fashioned. I mean, old-fashioned even by Klemperer standards, old-fashioned. I mean, somewhat soft edge, lacking in trumpets and drums and firmness of rhythm, which you would never expect from Schulte, but that's what I mean. He could surprise you with his dullness if he wanted to. And I find these Haydns to be, well, not special. I mean, what can I tell you? Then we have, this is a classic. Wait a minute. The Beethoven Violin Concerto with Misha Elman in mono from 1955. That, of course, is a Misha Elman disc. For those of you who like Misha Elman, although at this point he was getting a little creaky himself. Then we have Mendelssohn, the Scottish Symphony with the LSO, and Beethoven's Fourth with the London Philharmonic. I mean, these are pretty cool. They're good performances. Schulte always did a good Beethoven Fifth. He really did. And I mean, his Vienna one was wonderful. So those are nice to have. And then we get some overtures by Rossini and Suppé with the London Philharmonic. And this is just fluff stuff. And Schulte was not a great fluff conductor. These, of course, are not terrible. The orchestra could play them just as well without him. But, when you do fluff, the great conductors, like Giulini and Karajan and Macaris and people like that, they did, or even Claudio Abbado and his Rossini, they treated it like it was the most difficult, fabulous, extraordinary, profound music in the world. And the results could be amazing. Just amazing. Schulte treats them like, light overtures. And so they are. There's nothing really wrong with that. Then we get Offenbach's Gaieté Parisienne with the Orchestra of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, and it's gay and it's Parisienne. I mean, it's perfectly fine. Then we get another fluff disc, Overtures by Verdi, Rossini, Offenbach, and Ponchielli. Well, it's not an overture, it's the Dance of the Hours. You know, your basic, exciting, rough and ready stuff. Nothing to write home about. Then the Gounod Faust Ballet. There's got to be some. Oh, this is still on that other disc. You also get the Gounod Faust Ballet. We're up to CD 14 already out of 36. And so far, there's been an awful lot of fluff, hasn't there? But wait, the heavy stuff is still to come. And it gets more interesting from here on, from CD 15. So, Liszt, Les Preludes, Prometheus, and Festklange. Oh, don't you just love Festklange? It's so much fun. Da 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 bum 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 ba ba. You get to hear that about 500 times. And then Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy with Jorge Bolet, and the London Phil at the piano. So those are fun, and the list is good. It's really actually not just vulgar. It's well done. It's nicely done. Oh, then we have the famous Russian Huji What's It disc. Oh, this disappointed me something awful. It's the Ruslan Ludmila Overture, Mussorgsky's Kovanshchina, Prelude, A Night on Bald Mountain, which is really fast, Prince Igor, and then the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto with Julius Katchen, which is really quite good and fun to hear. But the other pieces, they just don't catch fire. They're just going through the motions. They really are. But now the heavens are about to part. We get to Schulte doing Elgar. Yes. Note the demonic grin on my face because Schulte is doing Elgar. I love his Elgar. Why? Because he treated it with his usual urgency. It doesn't moon about. It doesn't just lay there and get soggy. It's not soft and flabby like so many Elgar performances are. And I'm not going to name names here, because there was always great Elgar. I mean, Adrian Bolt did great Elgar, but Schultes, he was one of the few conductors who did both symphonies equally well because perhaps the approach was the same. And he didn't try to make the music sound more profound than it really is. He turned it into what it really is, which is sort of late romantic, virtuoso orchestral music. And yes, it has its depths. I'm not denying Elgar his profundity. Heaven forfend, I should deny Elgar his profundity. But Schulte doesn't stop dead at the profundity bits at the expense of the rest. These are wonderfully shaped, exciting performances of Symphonies 1 and 2. I love them. I really do. And they just sound wonderful. And the same holds true of Falstaff, which can be, the experience of death in sound if you don't move it along. And in the South, which is very exciting. I mean, Schulte was a good Strauss conductor, and in the South, it's basically, Richard Strauss goes to England and visits Italy, or something like that. It does that. And then we have, the Cockaigne Overture and Pomp and Circumstance Marches, which are nice and loud, ballsy, and the Enigma Variations, and and God Save the Queen. So then we have Elgar Violin Concerto with Kyung Hwa Chung, excellent, absolutely first rate, and not too dreary, droopy, slow. It's actually one of the best balanced performances of that piece I know. The first movement and the finale are almost exactly at the same time. And Chung plays fabulously. It's a wonderful performance. And then we get the Planets. Now, the Planets with Schulte was kind of interesting because, again, it's one of those performances where he just doesn't raise the roof the way you'd think he would in the Planets. I mean, you really think Schulte, it's the Planets. It should be completely insane, but it isn't. It isn't. If anything, Mars and Jupiter and, the big bits, they're a little underplayed, I think. I mean, certainly Schulte was never a big fan of percussion, which, of course, in my book is deserving of the death penalty. and especially in Mars, where you've got, such a flamboyant and fabulous tam-tam part and whatnot. But it's not just about percussion. It's about top to bottom sonority and balance between all the orchestral sections. He seemed to focus more on the brass instruments at the expense of everybody else. And I mean, the Planets is largely band music anyway, so it should work. But for some reason, it's not the most exciting Planets out there. And that shocked me. I remember when I got it, because I was all raring to go. I thought this was going to be really hot stuff. And I came away with it just going, well. Mahler I, LSO, one of the best things Schulte ever did, certainly one of his best Mahler performances. The only thing it's missing is a little bass at the bottom end. This was one of those Walthamstow Town Hall recordings, I think, wasn't it? Or something. No, Wigmore. No, Kingsway. Sorry, Kingsway. The one where they cut the bass off because they didn't want to get the rumbling of the underground underneath the orchestra. So they sort of leveled off the low bass, which is such a pity. It made kind of a woody sonority at the bottom of the orchestra. But boy, it's a great Mahler I. It does the end of the third movement, the end of the Funeral March, that long diminuendo, better than anybody. It's amazing for its subtlety and controlled finesse, not qualities you normally associate with Schulte. Mahler II, an excellent Mahler II. And the only thing about the Mahler II is that the sonics were so weird. I mean, it's hugely manipulated sonically. I remember the final chord. I mean, you talk about tam-tams. Boy, have you got tam-tams. They're like solos at the end of the symphony. And the final chord, there's supposed to be an organ. It's supposed to be triple forte. And it's all in the background. All you hear are these two tam-tams crashing away. And then the final chord, it's like they put the orchestra on like a sliding platform. And as they hit the final chord, out it comes at you like this. And it gets closer and closer until it goes whap. Totally artificial. But it's a very good performance. It really is much better than his remake in both the first and the second symphonies. Then we get, Mahler III. Ugh. Schulte never got Mahler III. It's surprising. Again, you would think it's got tons of brass and noise and craziness, especially the first movement. But it was always a lousy performance. Even the Penguin Guide panned it. And they were right. It's terrible. It's sloppy. It's insensitive. I don't think he enjoyed it. His remake was no better. I mean, it was better played. But as a performance, as an interpretation, it was all just so completely routine. I mean, that's the word. Just there's time beating. It was metronomic. Ugh, awful. Then Mahler IX. I love this Mahler IX. This is Mahler IX seen through the eyes of a great Strauss conductor, because that first movement is so voluptuous. You don't think of Mahler IX as a voluptuous piece normally. I mean, you just don't. But it is sexy and sumptuous and catastrophic. It sounds like a bit of Electra or something like that. And the second movement, that crazy waltz in the second movement with all the sforzando brass interjections really punched out, and a demonic rondo burlesque, and a finale that's 23 minutes, just about the perfect timing. I mean, yeah, you can spend an extra 6 or 7 minutes at it too, but there's no need. It's a wonderful performance with the LSO really in good form. I've always recommended this performance. It's a real sleeper. And the remake, again, in Chicago was no comparison. None whatsoever. It was also a botched recording. Someone left a microphone under the tubular chimes. So whenever, like in the first movement, the orchestra dies down, you hear this sort of like bell reverberation or something, and they didn't fix it. I don't know what was going on there. Now we come to the really juicy stuff. Schulte's first swing at Bartok, which he knew fabulously well, and he remade everything he did here in Chicago, and it's not as good. One of the reasons it's not as good is because the sonics, the early digital sonics that Decca had, were very glary and somewhat shallow, and they didn't have an appealing soundstage. I don't know, for some reason. The remakes just seem rather fast and what's the word? Casual. I think that's the word, just casual. But these LSO Bartoks are great, all of them. They're fabulous. So we get, first of all, the music for strings, percussion, and celesta, which is one of the very greatest ever. I mean, it's right up there with Reiner's and anybody you care to name. It's fantastic. It's got the tempo. The tempos are right, and the playing is great, and I just love it. It's really one of my go-to recordings of the work. There are like 3 or 4. This is one of them. And the dance suite's great, and you get the Hariano suite, which is always fun. I mean, it's not the most orchestrally detailed, but it's fun. And Salmus Hungaricus, which is very good, and the Peacock variations, and the Galanta dances, all this stuff is first rate. Absolutely first rate. And more Bartok, the Concerto for Orchestra, and the dance suite. Again, do we get 2 dance suites? Yes, he did 2 dance suites. Who knew? I always you listen to them interchangeably. But yes, very good Concerto for Orchestra. And then we have the music for strings, percussion, and celesta. Again, oh, that's right. There were the earlier ones. And then like the stereo ones. Were these mono? Wait a minute. Yes, there were earlier mono ones, and then the stereo remakes. And the stereo remakes, of course, were the ones I always listen to for the most part, because they are better. They're better sonically, and the performances are every bit as intense and exciting, and they are just great, absolutely great. And let's see, 31. Yes, and the Miraculous Mandarin Suite, which is just hell for leather, which can't have too much of that in the Miraculous Mandarin Suite. And then the 3 piano concertos with Ashkenazi, which are marvelous. Absolutely lovely. And the 2nd violin concerto with Kyung-Hwa Chung again, who did some of her best work with Schulte. I think they were a very good partnership. I really do. She just really responded, I think, to his brand of intensity and his very excited accompaniments. And she really just let it rip, which is wonderful. And then there's Bluebeard's Castle with Kolosh Kovacs and Sylvia Shash, whatever her name was, Sylvia Sass, you want to call her that. I have to say, as far as Bluebeard's Castles go, this one is a touch droopy. It's nowhere near as exciting as the Kertész, for example, also on Decca. I thought Schulte was a little bit off his game in Bluebeard. But, I mean, it's not bad, not by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it sounds a little diffuse. It could have more focus, more sharpness, more edge. And again, isn't that a surprising thing to say about Schulte? The king of edge? But there you go. Stravinsky, Oedipus Rex. This is fun. No one ever talks about this performance. It's quite good. The cast is excellent. You've got Peter Pears as Oedipus. He's finally not singing Benjamin Britten. And you get Kirsten Meyer and Donald McIntyre and Stafford Dean and Ryland Davies and Benjamin Luxon. And Alec McCowan is the speaker. It's a very good Oedipus Rex. I mean, there aren't that many bad Oedipus Rexes. The only way you blow an Oedipi is if you have like really awful soloists. Because orchestrally, I mean, you just blast your way through it and it does its thing. It's Stravinsky after all. But it's good to have it back. It's really good to have. I was just listening to it a couple days ago. And I just remember, back in the day having a bout of nostalgia, thinking, oh, it's so nice to be able to listen to this again. I remember when these were new and it was exciting. You take them home and unwrap the plastic and stick them on. And, as long as the pressing wasn't too horrible, you just sat back and it was a discovery. You felt like stuff was really happening when these records came out because there weren't millions of recordings of everything. So each new one was an event and you listened more carefully. You didn't just sit there and go, oh God, another one. It's my 50th version. It was a little special. And I think Schulte, really rode that idea of, not doing, everything 150 times to his success and fame, especially when he got Chicago. I mean, he was the first guy to do the complete ring in the studio. And that became sort of his watchword. And so, Yeah, anyway, I loved Oedipus Rex. And finally, up disc 36, Walton, the Coronation Tadayam and Belshazzar's Feast. Another Belshazzar also never got much love, as I recall. I think it's really exciting. It's a very, very good Belshazzar, and it's well recorded. It's got nice throbby organ pedals, and I mean, it's really fun. And the Coronation Te Deum, nobody ever does it. It's really a wonderful work. So that's it. That's Schulte in London. It gets better as it goes. It's really worth having. I mean, it's really pretty easy what the good stuff is. It's worth having for the Elgar, all of it. It's worth having for Mahler 1, 2, and 9, which are well worth hearing. It's worth hearing for the Bartok and the Walton, and the concertos with some of the really great soloists, with Kachin and Chung and, Misha Elman, if you want. Those things are all lots of fun to have. When it comes to the classical repertoire, the Haydn, Mozart, Schulte really came into his own with Beethoven, which is very good. And the one Mendelssohn Symphony is good. And then there's fluff, the fluff discs. And I was never impressed by his fluff. And that's me, because a lot of that stuff got very, very powerfully positive reviews when it came out. I remember them vividly. And, that's why I ran out and bought the records, just like the rest of you. I took other people's word for it. And I just thought that they were not as precise and exciting and devoted as you need to be to really do fluff well. Because I am a fluff connoisseur, and I love my fluff to be extremely, extremely serious, because that's how it sounds fun. That brings the fun out more than anything else. Anyway, I wouldn't worry about it. I know a lot of you are waiting for this. You don't need me to tell you to grab it. Like I said, it's a limited edition, and the great stuff is really, really good. It really is, and I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to listen to a lot of it all over again. And after a long time, some of it, really a long time. So keep on listening, folks. Go get Schulte in London. Why not? Take care.